Welcome back to 2IT Sports. Francis and Jason. We have a plethora of stories to get to. Some a little light-hearted, but some not so much. So we get into the darker story of today. Straight to it. There's been several football child sex abuse claims thrown around in England. This is a matter that has been brought up in the past, but hasn't been as addressed as it has been in the recent times. So we have a video from FA Chairman Greg Clark providing some context on this, and we will bring it back and discuss.
Is the FA's ever faced?
I think it's certainly the biggest one I can remember. I think the moral consequences of failing to deal with some of these issues in the past, we must get to the bottom of. We've got an inquiry led by an external QC who will make sure we know the facts. We've got the annual audit of our child protection procedures going on in the next few months, so we'll check on what's going on. But we're certainly taking it extremely seriously.
Could you have acted a little quicker? It's been said you was too slow and that this review isn't wide enough. It should be a full-scale inquiry or investigation.
I think we've acted very quickly, to be frank, because what the main thing to do is not to encumber the criminal investigations of the police by tainting their evidence. And so we've agreed with the police we won't talk to any of the victims formally because they have to talk to them, they have to take statements, and we're not allowed to interfere in that process. So we've taken advice on how to set up both an audit of our practices and also making sure we have external supervision of our inquiry. Those conclusions will be the external QC's conclusions. The FA will not write them. So we believe we're doing as much as we can to make sure that we step up to the mark and are in a position to be able to disclose everything.
All right. So allow me to get into some more context as to this, how this all came about. So this has been about 3 weeks since ex-Crewe Alexandra defender Andy Woodward, he waived his right to anonymity to say that he was a victim of sexual abuse as a young footballer. And then since then, it's been noted here from the FA, 350 people have alleged they are victims and 55 amateur and professional football clubs are linked to allegations of abuse. Some of them are really notable teams. Notable players have spoken out. Paul Stewart, David White, Steve Walters, and of course, as I mentioned, Andy Woodward. These are guys that have played for Chelsea, Manchester City, and at the youth level of all these prestigious clubs, and then going into some clubs that are in the lower levels. But since this was first spoke out, there has been several young players who at the time were young players who have spoken out, because as we know, before I get into my opinions based on this, that when it comes to sexual abuse, I'm taking statistics here in the United States, it is the least reported crime, especially when it involves someone that the victim knows. So I'm sure this is the same across the pond. Victims of sexual abuse don't feel comfortable speaking out. It's still something that is plaguing our society, and we have to do what's necessary to allow them to feel more comfortable, to bring those despicable perpetrators to justice. And it has happened in world football dating back several years. So, Jason, this is something that the FA really has to deal with. There's plenty of several separate investigations going into. All of the clubs that have been accused are carrying out their own investigation, and the FA is looking to try and bring those who are responsible to justice.
Well, it's going to get cluttered because there's 21 police investigations from every which town you can imagine, or city, I should say, too, in mostly England, but also up to Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland as well. On top of this, you mentioned one of the statistics being it's the least, at least in the United States, and I'm sure carries over into across the pond in certain statistics as well, that it's the least admitted crime amongst, especially the youth. It's also the least admitted crime amongst men or boys. Yeah. And a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with the fact of leaning back on them knowing the person. Because when you read some of the stories and some of the allegations from Paul Stewart, Andy Woodward, a lot of it comes down to, at a young age, inappropriate touching, and not like on the pitch or in any kind of open quarters, more in the idea of like naked massages. I think Paul Stewart mentioned, Andy Woodward referenced a few in terms of just uncomfortable situations that led to even some more severe sexual abuse crimes. I wanted to also point out that there was the helpline, and that's what kind of started to really shed more light on these cases. It started off with 50 calls in the first day from players, ex-players, in an anonymous tone calling in. And by the end of the first week, there was over 600 different ex-players, coaches, to admit to some issues of sexual abuse through English football at the youth level.
Yeah, and especially as you mentioned, so in my opinion, football, as I mentioned, I think a couple of clips ago, a few days ago, is one of the most masculine sports, especially across the pond. It's in our culture. It's what guys and females do, but more often than not, guys, they grow up, they play football, they get whatever standard, they go to the pub afterwards, they have a laugh and a joke. So when you're in that society, it's harder than it would be in most societies, I feel, to come out and to hold those accountable who have mistreated you in that situation, because you almost feel embarrassed. You feel that it's against against your manlyhood that you allowed something like this to happen. But a lot of the times, these are young boys. At the time when this happened, they weren't clearly aware of what was going on. They put their trust in an individual. And despite the fact that I don't want to broaden it out, I see such similar situations going on when it comes to looking at someone in a position of power to that, as what we've investigated for years in the Catholic Church, is when you look at someone of a higher power, and especially when you're a young, aspiring footballer.
If you're an impressionable person, and that's what happened within that Catholic Church. I've
played for youth teams in Scotland before to continue my career, and you're wanting to impress so much. Like, because you're a very small fish in a massive pond. Yeah. Football is such a competitive sport in the UK. So these horrible individuals, unfortunately, for years have took advantage of this and tried to utilize their position in an area of power as leverage. You have to do this for me. You have to allow me to give you a naked massage or send pictures to you and don't report it, because this is how you get ahead. This is how you get into those positions. And as much as I think that the FA is handling it relatively well at the moment, they haven't in the past. And a lot of clubs really need to be held accountable. BBC's Victoria Derbyshire programme reported that the FA scrapped a major review of its child protection policies in 2003.
I was reading that, yeah, too.
The child protection policy has to be of the utmost importance, especially because this isn't something that has just been brought to light in recent terms. Several clubs have been accused of this in the past. Even my own beloved Glasgow Celtic have been accused and found guilty of this dating back several years ago.
And it's easier to find those who aren't accused. There's not that many.
Yeah,
and that's what I found amazing about it. I think the total is 55 amateur and professional clubs are linked. Now, linked, of course, does not mean guilty. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But it's an overwhelming amount of clubs at the professional and amateur level, and what I find so disturbing about it is what you were alluding to just before, is you're put, as growing up in any kind of sports league, you're put in a position where your actions and your moves off the park and off the pitch, off the field, whatever you want to refer to it as, have drastic effects on your career going forward, because to maybe a 13-year-old boy who's playing in the lower leagues or the amateur level or the youth level, his playing time can decrease if it is so to be found out, which I'm sure in some cases it will be, that he was put in a position to say, well, if you don't let me send you those pictures, if you don't let me touch you inappropriately, whichever way you want to put this, well, then we're going to play Johnny instead of Jimmy.
Exactly.
And if you go tell anybody, I'll deny it, and most likely in those cases, the coach is more believed, oh, he's just taking it out of, he's exaggerating the situation. It wasn't anything like that.
Yeah.
Your word against mine is dangerous, especially coming from somebody with any form of authority. I'm sure in a sport like football in England, coaches have some degree of authority because of how dominant of a sport it is.
I don't care how it hurts your club if you're looking into a coach that has been responsible for the growth of fantastic footballers for decades. If that guy is looked into and has found out that he's been carrying out indecent acts, then I don't give a shit about your club's history or the name. We're only caring about the youth that put so much of their faith in this football culture that grows them to become footballers. So if there's people taking advantage of it, I couldn't give two shits who's collateral damage at it. I want those people found out, even if they're long gone, and still someone held accountable for these actions.